Michael was a gifted connector and a little bit of a magnet, I think, for very interesting people. I was thinking that sometimes when I needed to get in touch with someone and he knew them, that was a wonderful way to, a wonderful subject line. I am a friend of Michael Rothenberg. And boom, I'd get a response, even to a cold email.
Michael could draw from so many parts of his lives to connect with folks. And he had this way of talking to you that made you feel like you were helping him, you were teaching him. And it was his charm that was disarming for folks.
Michael's leadership was demonstrated at any number of different positions along his career. And he always seemed to want to bring out in other people what their potential was, which is a hallmark of a great leader.
I don't know if we met when we were 2 or we were 3 or we were 4. I'm not 100% sure. We spent our summers together in a summer community up in Westchester, founded in the late 20s by Jewish activists, progressives. It's a very political community. It was involved in every social movement of the last century. And it was a community that was founded on this principle of cooperation and on committees. Everything is run by a committee. There's a road committee, a social committee, the barn committee, beach committee. Michael and I both connected with it very passionately. This idea that people counted and that you could make a difference and that being part of the community was being part of a committee and helping. He developed, a code of ethics for himself. And he really lived by them. In undergraduate at Hamilton, he was very involved in the South African divestment there. And that was a real awakening, I think, for him to see, the value of those kinds of protests and what change he could make.
I first laid eyes on Michael at one of our early annual lunches. I say laid eyes on him because I was kind of the opening person, and I looked out over the audience, and there was this amazingly handsome young man sitting out there, and by far the youngest person in the room. I found out afterward he was Stanley Rothenberg's son. He came to work for us as a volunteer during his second semester, and then he came on his Hayes Fellowship to work as a summer intern for us.
We actually met when we were in our 20s. Michael was a new-ish lawyer at South Brooklyn Legal Services, and I was a newish director of a group called the Citywide Task Force on Housing Court. He wanted to meet with us because he had this idea that he and Ron Rasmussen could be good resources to small nonprofits, helping them with issues around board development and governance. I think my main impression at the time was that he had so much chutzpah to think that, people our age, could be that kind of a resource to groups. I still felt very green, and he had so much confidence in already in kind of what he knew.
He went to the Rockefeller Family Fund for a year, and then to Vera, and I think all of that for Michael was exploring different areas of public interest in poverty law and civil rights. I knew he was kind of getting a little restless at Vera, and he was head of a small project, but I know he felt that he could do more things, and I was just like, you can come here and be our associate director. We would make a really great pair doing this together. And I think he said, I probably should talk this over with Erlene, but he came back pretty quickly to say that, yes, he'd accept the offer.
He came in as this new young associate director, and he really changed things. When he first arrived, he took a lot of pains to be respectful of the work that was already going on here and not to be presumptuous. So it seems to me that his strategy initially was to be really helpful. He did things like, get us all email, which we didn't have at the time, or, I think, I don't know if it was when he was an associate director, I think it was, but he started work on a 403B plan. He started to kind of work on working conditions, types of things that needed to be done that no one had had the time to do before.
I understood that it had the potential to be a better organization, and it needed better management, and it needed some of that creativity and vitality that Michael brought to anything that he did. And I think not only when he was the associate director here, but then when he finally took the organization over, which he was really ready to do at the point that he did, that he took it and took the potential that its founders thought it had and made it real.
He was coming onto a board which was in itself in the process of transition. Michael was, in some ways, an irreverent breath of fresh air. He saw an opportunity there that he, over the course of, obviously, a number of years, did to reinvigorate the board. But his peculiar magic was brought to bear.
There were three types of calls that I got from Michael where he was at his most excited. One was, he loved the little juicy bits of gossip around town. He wasn't really a gossip, but, he's a people person. A fundraising coup, he never hesitated to share, great fundraising news. And the third was when he had hired someone or was recruiting someone who he thought was top-notch. He really talked about people, as if they were family. He was just so unbelievably proud of their accomplishments. Proud when he hired them, proud when they did great things. That really was for him, I think, the highest achievement.
The NILPE staff are superstars. Deeply, deeply committed to work, really understand community organizing, and that puts them in the position of being able to do the highest quality lawyering, but in a way that makes them exceptional partners.
Michael gave program staff a lot of respect and leeway to do what we needed to do. In addition, his emphasis on fundraising, with working with the firms to build a strong general support base, meant that as staff, you weren't always chasing from one grant to the other.
There are a lot of different kinds of executive directors, and some see sort of an organization as a vehicle for, their vision for justice or whatever it is, and sometimes with that there's a neglect for sort of the health of the organization. But he was very attuned to what it would take to make the organization kind of vibrant and effective and healthy.
With staff, he reached out to them every year. You would find a handwritten note congratulating you on another year here, and being that I've been here for so long, I definitely have a lot of those notes and saved all of them, and I think that, added a very likable, personable touch to our work and made us feel not just staff members, but as people that work together and bonded, with the same issues.
I was here for 2 years. At some point, he took a few of us out thinking that we might be future leaders. So I think we did, maybe 1 or 2 lunches with him, and it seemed to be something that Michael really appreciated doing, and the staff certainly appreciated having an executive director that is thinking about his staff's long-term interests and potential future.
As a social worker coming into this office that is predominantly employed with attorneys, I felt like his leadership really was very successful at conveying this message of respect, and that we are here because we have something all to contribute, no matter who we are.
I remember him telling us once in the group that he made a practice of always having on his calendar meetings with board members, breakfast or lunch. And then once he finished meeting with all the board members, he would just start again. And we all thought this was insane. It sounds crazy. But I think he really took seriously his role as a leader in knowing kind of everything that was going on, how people were feeling about the work of New York lawyers.
He was, I think, one of those executive directors who really kept in touch with everybody on the board. And as the board grew larger, it became harder to do that. So he was constantly on the phone, just keeping in touch. He wanted the board to feel involved in the organization.
Michael would call me and say, we'd really like you to be on the litigation and program committee. It wasn't just because he thought I was a nice person. It wasn't even really because he thought I could do something for him. It was more sort of organic. It was, he really was sort of drawing me in.
And they have a vision here at NILPI about what NILPI should be and the kind of work it should do, that it should take on impact work, and that it should be, be an alliance of lawyering and community organizing. And when there would be temptation along the path, like I'd say, you should apply for this grant, it would be really good, you could be your entry track for lawyers, and he would ponder that because he was nice to me, and then he'd say, no, that's not really what we are going to do here. And he would resist that, and that's very hard to resist when you're running a nonprofit. But he stayed on mission.
The decisions to do the work have always been based on the merits of the work, and I think that that's very unique for us. I think it's also very emblematic of how effective Michael was at generating support from the private bar. Having that kind of financial support without having to tie it to specific programs or to specific kind of priorities of an outside organization, I think is really, it's a tremendous luxury that folks here have, and is part of what makes this a great place to work.
NYLPI has always been a great organization, and I should call it NILPI because that's what Michael liked to call it, but I'm from the old gang, so it's always been a very fine organization, but it needed some of that creativity and vitality that Michael brought to anything that he did. And he took it and took the potential that its founders thought it had and made it real, turned it into not just a good organization, but an organization that was really excellent in everything that it did.
Michael was a convener. He was somebody who, in the way that he connected to me personally as a mentor, he connected to everyone in a really sort of deep and personal way, and really saw what they brought to the field, what they brought to the work, sort of really believed in and appreciated all of that in every kind of person. And so he was remarkably able to then see something in someone else and say, you would be a kindred spirit with this person, and he would bring you together.
Whether you needed an accountant or a chiropractor, or in my case, a development director, Michael always seemed to be pulling out a piece of paper and writing down a name and a number. And one of the things I'll remember most about him doing that for me many times is this look of pure joy he would get on his face at being able to give you that name and number, and usually it was a really good name and number.
His suggestion that you would connect with somebody felt very authentic, and I think over the last few weeks, as I've sort of connected to people who were sort of in his wide world, I realized, no, those were authentic. He really did believe, and he was usually right, that if you connected with this person he thought you should connect with, that there was a reason for that.
I was in a job that was good, but not great, and he decided that he wanted to rescue me. So he called me up and said, there's this great gig. It's gonna be coordinating the pro bono for a big, fancy law firm that you've never heard of, all around the world. And I said, sure, I'll be your reference, that's fine. And he said, no, stupid, you're gonna do this job, and you're gonna be great at it. And with that, he introduced me to my now boss, 7 years later. Not a dull moment, and I have never loved a job as much as I do now. But there's so many people who have this story. There's so many of us who have that story, and think Michael was just our fairy job father.
He was pretty well liked, even among our fiercest competitors, and he was able to develop a working coalition that generated some very good results against long odds, working through Albany to generate some state fundraising for our organization and for others.
The belief that the relationships we build and the work we do long term is much more important than any one organization, any one person, any one career, and that it's really clear from looking at the people who gathered at his funeral, you know, that legacy won't be forgotten.
We had this conversation about lack of people of color in civil legal services. I've never seen someone get so excited about something the way he jumped into this issue. Him and Lillian Moore and a few other people have been thinking about this and talking about this for a long time. And the fact that I brought it up to him, I think, was just like, you get it. Like, you see exactly where the issue is. But I don't think I really got it until we really got into a conversation about it. And pretty much for the next few years, we talked about this issue, about how to change it, how to create this pipeline, you know, to bring young people from the moment they start thinking about this kind of work, about doing it from a civil perspective, a nonprofit perspective, rather than just going to a big law firm. I mean, that was Michael.
Michael, to me, represents all that's good about our legal profession. Its commitment to excellence, and most importantly, its commitment to the pursuit of justice.
He left me with an even greater dedication to public service. I mean, at the time, I'm now in public service, although on the other side of the caption. And when I was debating that, thinking about Michael and what he had committed himself to do was one of the things that inspired me when I did that.
Michael made me feel special all the time, both as a person and as a professional here. And I was honored to be his notary. He always called upon me to notarize, and we had a lot of fun.
He had tremendous respect in the private bar and the people who were at the law firms, and he respected them. It was a good relationship. He had tremendous respect in the public interest community, which only grew as he started to do things like create the monthly lunches for executive directors. So I think one thing is he took the organization and really turned it into that kind of prominent national organization that it had the capacity to be. And I think that building institutions that will last over time is something that's really important, and that will certainly be a legacy of his.
It was so hard right after Michael passed. I mean, there was such an incredible outpouring of emotion. I think because virtually everyone on the staff, Michael had a hand in recruiting. He had obviously spent so much time and energy over the years kind of trying to create this environment where the staff could really flourish. In the weeks since Michael's passing, I've been really amazed at how strong they are, and there's no better way to honor Michael's legacy than to ensure that the work continues.
People are really committed to making sure that New York Lawyers stays strong and moves forward, right? And I think there's a real commitment among those of us that he mentored to make sure that we don't fail him, right? That we don't give up on that he saw in us. To make sure that we do with our talents and our gifts what he believed that we could do, and to make sure that we take that same approach to the folks coming up after us.
I like to think that people will build on his legacy of connecting, that we will maintain the connections that Michael gave to us. I know that I am being very intentional about doing that, and it is partly to hold Michael close, you know, but it's also to, as you said, to emulate him and to build on his model. And I think people will be more open-hearted, especially after his death, to be open to each other.
I think we all learned over that time how important it was to acknowledge that we needed each other. you know, again, it sounds a little cliche, but that there was, you know, there is a value in connecting to one another for support, because we like each other, because we make each other laugh, because it's just good to do things together and not alone. You know, that friendships aren't random, you know, that it's not just about, you know, like the spontaneity of life, but if you work at it, and you take care of friendships and you hold them precious, you'll gain a lot. And the work it takes is worth it over time.
The groups that he started and put together are going to keep meeting after he's gone, and it's going to be sadder, definitely without him, and he's going to be very missed. But he's put together communities that I think will endure.
There are people that lead because they're brilliant, just purely brilliant, but they're just not nice. There are people that have vision, a sense of vision and where to go, but they don't know how to sort of put things in place. Michael is that rare breed, that rare person that was able to, he's brilliant, had vision, and was incredibly charismatic. You bring that all together, you have what a real leader is.
The way that he did bring so many people together in so many different ways has taught us all, even now, especially now, that we are greater than the sum of our parts. And that we truly need each other. And that we do better when we're together. And I hope that's a lesson we will never forget.